A pregnant woman was about to give birth when she was struck by a bolt of white lightning. By the time she was rushed to the hospital, she had already lost consciousness. Miraculously, she managed to deliver the baby before she passed. But this child was unlike any other. His skin was ghostly white, and he had no hair whatsoever. The doctors called it albinism. The moment his father laid eyes on him, he broke down, not from love, but from disgust. He never even held the baby, just turned and walked away. And as if the child could sense the rejection, his brainwaves exploded off the charts. The doctors had never seen brainwave activity that intense. They thought the machine was broken. And just like that, this child lost both parents the moment he entered the world. He was raised by his grandfather, but kept locked in a basement like a monster. Years flew by, and after his grandfather passed, the local sheriff arrived with a welfare home director to check on the boy. The neighbors warned them the kid was either deformed or mentally disabled. He had been locked underground for 18 years, no sunlight, no school, basically a feral creature at this point. The two of them crept into the basement and searched nervously. They finally found him huddled in a corner, and both were left completely speechless. The boy's skin was pure white, he had no hair at all, and his eyes were pink, yet his gaze held nothing but humility and quiet sadness. The boy introduced himself as Powder. The director quickly noticed that Powder was polite and remarkably articulate, nothing like someone who had never been educated. So what exactly had kept him locked away down here all these years? The director spotted the bookshelves lining the walls, pulled out a random obscure title he'd never even heard of, and asked if Powder had read it. Powder didn't answer. He just told the director to pick any page. The director named one, and Powder recited the entire page, word for word, without a single mistake. The director's expression slowly froze. He had never met anyone with a memory like this, because Powder hadn't just memorized one book. Glancing around the basement, there were thousands of books on those shelves, and he had memorized every single one. The director was beginning to realize this child was a genius. But what he didn't know was that an insane memory was only one of Powder's abilities. Having spent his entire life underground, Powder stepped outside for the first time wearing dark sunglasses. He was polite and well-mannered, nothing like the monster the neighbors had described. But as he approached the parked cars, every single horn went off at once. People covered their ears in a panic. Just as they were about to leave, the sheriff looked up and noticed something strange. The roof of Powder's house was absolutely covered in lightning rods. Was this family really that afraid of thunder? What exactly was the mystery behind this boy? Powder, who had never once stepped outside his basement, was fascinated by everything around him. Soon, the director brought him to Ripley's home, a place full of troubled youth that society had thrown away. They all stared at Powder's bizarre appearance, drawn in by sheer curiosity. Those looks of disgust made it clear he was going to be an easy target. Sure enough, at dinner, the home's resident bully swaggered over with his crew. They sat beside Powder and mocked him, calling him a vampire from outer space. One of them grabbed a spoon and forced it to hang from Powder's nose, just to humiliate the freak. Everyone waited for the show, but nobody expected what happened next. Powder calmly took the spoon, and with just his thumb, gently rubbed it a few times. Suddenly, with a series of crackling pops, every single metal utensil in the room flew through the air and slammed together into one pile. This was Powder's second ability, attracting and controlling all metal objects. Powder meant no harm, and offered the room a gentle smile, but the eyes staring back at him were filled with nothing but fear. The director took him in for a full physical, and every result came back completely normal. In fact, Powder was physically stronger than the average person. Having witnessed Powder's extraordinary learning and memory abilities, the director arranged for him to attend school, hoping he could finally start living a normal life. But his appearance still drew a crowd the moment he walked in, and on his very first day, things went sideways fast. This physics class was about to go way beyond the boundaries of science. Powder suddenly began trembling uncontrollably, gripping the edge of the desk with white knuckles. The pen on the desk started spinning on its own. He was barely holding it together. It turned out the teacher was running an electricity experiment, and Powder was somehow sinking with the current. The more agitated he got, the stronger the current became. Suddenly, a bolt of electricity shot across the room like lightning, drawn straight to Powder, and pierced directly into his heart. His whole body convulsed and shook. Then the current shot back out of him and returned to the equipment, forming a closed loop, and lifting him entirely off the ground. The physics teacher's entire understanding of reality shattered in that moment. The whole room stood there with their jaws on the floor. This was his third ability, absorbing electricity. He had pulled every last volt from the entire building. The physics teacher grabbed a bench and smashed the equipment, cutting the circuit. Powder lay curled on the floor, smoke rising from his body. The teacher rushed over and touched him, and a strange current passed through his entire body, sending a full body shiver down his spine. He described it as a sensation he had never felt before, an almost euphoric jolt. Powder was taken to the hospital. As the physics teacher animatedly described the scientifically inexplicable phenomena, the sheriff listened with a face full of skepticism. Even the doctor who had just examined Powder said the kid was completely unharmed, not a single mark from the electricity. Meanwhile, Powder had quietly slipped out of the hospital on his own. All he wanted was to go home, but the sheriff stopped him halfway. When the sheriff asked Powder why he didn't like hospitals, he said the worst day of his life had been spent in one. He could still remember, in vivid detail, the moment his father abandoned him as a newborn. That day, the grief sent his brainwaves flooding across the entire page. The sheriff brought Powder back to the home, where a room full of experts, scholars, and doctors was waiting. Because the results of Powder's IQ test had left them all stunned. His intelligence was so far off the charts, it couldn't even be categorized. But Dr. Jessup looked at him with nothing but doubt in his eyes. They were treating Powder like a rare lab specimen, not a human being. Powder could feel the way everyone looked at him, like he was some kind of freak, and so he turned and walked out without answering a single question. With no parents and no friends, Powder had never once felt warmth from another human being. So rather than the people around him, who were full of hostility, he preferred the company of animals. But then the home's bully showed up in the woods with a rifle, aiming straight at Powder just because he couldn't stand the sight of him. A gunshot rang out in the distance, and they all ran toward it. A deer lay on the ground, shot by Deputy Harley, who had brought the troubled teens out here for a hunting trip. He boasted about his perfect shot, claiming that if you fired this way, the deer wouldn't feel a thing. But Powder's face was full of grief. He quietly placed his hand on the deer, then grabbed Deputy Harley's arm and activated his fourth ability, psychic transference. All living things have a soul. The deer's agony was instantly transferred directly into Deputy Harley's body. In a single moment, he felt like he was the one who had been shot. He felt the deer's raw terror in the face of death. death, and his face contorted in unbearable pain. He collapsed to the ground, shaking violently, fully inhabiting the body of that dying deer. Deputy Harley got exactly what he deserved, and bolted away in a total panic. This would be the most terrifying memory of his entire life, and as the one who transferred the experience, Powder felt every bit of that suffering too. Yet his eyes held only compassion for the deer. From that day on, Deputy Harley threw away every single one of his rifles and dropped out of all his shooting competitions. He never wanted to hunt again, never wanted to touch a gun again. After hearing everything Deputy Harley described, the sheriff fell into deep thought. He went to find Powder right away and asked for his help. The sheriff's wife was paralyzed and bedridden, conscious but unable to speak, barely clinging to life. She seemed to be holding on for something she hadn't been able to let go of. Powder came to her bedside, gently placed his hand on her forehead, and felt what was in her heart. Then he spoke her unspoken words aloud to the sheriff. It turned out his wife had always cherished the happy life they had shared together. The only thing she couldn't let go of was their son, because for years, the sheriff and his son had been estranged. She hoped that after she was gone, father and son could find their way back to each other, keep each other company, and neither would have to face the world alone. The sheriff broke down in tears and promised her he would. And shortly after, with her final wish fulfilled, his wife passed peacefully in his arms. Their son rushed over when he heard the news. Looking into his father's tear-filled eyes, he felt a rush of emotions he couldn't put into words. The father slowly walked over and pulled his son into a tight embrace. The son felt like he was a little kid again, all the distance between them gone in an instant. Deep down, they had always known how much they meant to each other. Powder watched from upstairs, overcome with envy. What was ordinary to everyone else, family, was a luxury he could only dream of. He had never experienced love, family, or friendship. But maybe, just maybe, he was about to find love. A girl named Lindsay approached him first. She was the only person in the entire school who didn't look at Powder like he was a freak. Powder's gentleness, his quiet sadness, and his impossible abilities quickly won her heart. Yes, this boy looked completely alien. Snow-white skin, no hair, no eyebrows, and those pink eyes. And yet somehow, on their very first date, he managed to capture her heart entirely, because he showed her something she had never felt before, his power of psychic transference. When their hands touched, a current passed through Lindsay's body, and she felt a rush like nothing she had ever experienced. At the same time, she could feel exactly what was in his heart, and he could feel every unspoken fear in hers. In that single moment, they were completely open to each other. No walls, no secrets. Lindsay leaned in and kissed him, but right at that moment, her father appeared out of nowhere. He had seen everything, and he stormed over in a rage. He grabbed Powder by the collar like he weighed nothing. Luckily, the director arrived just in time and pulled him off. But as he left, Lindsay's father shot Powder a cold warning. Stay away from his daughter, and don't even think about punching above his weight. And just like that, Powder's love story was over before it ever really began. Whether it was school or the home, he had nothing left to hold on to in either place. All he had received was an endless stream of cruelty. Powder packed his things and decided to leave this place behind for good. But on his way out, the bully blocked his path one last time. He snatched Powder's hat and kept on humiliating him. The group grabbed Powder by the collar, dragged him outside, stripped him, and kicked him into a mud puddle. Even that wasn't enough for them. Then suddenly, every metal object on their bodies ripped free and launched into the air. Powder had finally hit his limit, and the energy inside him detonated, sending the entire gang flying. The bully's heart stopped on impact. The whole group panicked, but Powder walked over calmly, dropped to his knees, and placed both hands on the bully's chest. He used the electricity inside him to shock the boy's heart back to life, over and over again. Everyone watched in stunned silence. After every ounce of effort, the bully finally came back. With that done, Powder finally left, for real this time. He made his way back to the house where he had spent over a decade of his life, back down to the empty basement, because this was the only place in the world that ever felt safe to him. The director followed him there, filled with guilt for having brought Powder out into a world that was never ready for him. The sheriff and Deputy Harley arrived too. Because of the bully incident, they were supposed to bring Powder in for questioning. But when the sheriff and Powder locked eyes, something shifted. The sheriff grabbed Deputy Harley's radio and hurled it away, then smiled and let Powder go. At that moment, the sky darkened and thunder rolled in from all directions. Powder sensed something calling to him. Ignoring everyone's desperate attempts to stop him, he turned and ran toward the storm without a moment's hesitation. He spread his arms wide and opened himself to the lightning, and the sky answered, crashing down a blinding bolt of white lightning, as if reaching out to welcome him home. This boy was so purely white, just like his soul, clean and good to the very core. He ran forward without looking back, each step more resolute and free than the last. Slowly, his entire being transformed into a bolt of white lightning, blazing with blinding light. Then a halo of light exploded outward, and he vanished from this world entirely. Perhaps he was an angel sent down to earth by God, and this angel, having seen enough, left in disappointment.